Sheila's instincts, honed by years of survival on the razor's edge, screamed the moment Luna's absence became undeniable. In the predatory cat-and-mouse game she had perfected long ago, every missing piece of information was an opportunity, every shadow a possible hiding place. Luna's secret apartment, its existence so carefully scrubbed from all known addresses, could only be betrayed by one who knew too much. Sheila traced the threads of hushed conversations, the hurried whispers among clinic staff fearful of Lee's wrath, the furtive phone calls that ended whenever her name mysteriously buzzed across the caller ID. Under the cover of darkness, she slipped through a side door left unlocked by an unseen accomplice, her heartbeat a steady drum in her ears as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors, each step practiced and sure. The dim light revealed a minimalist sanctuary. A small bed strewn with medical supplies, and force stand dripping into Luna's arm, and monitors flashing the fragile signals of a life on the mend. Sheila raised her discreet camera, the flash suppressed by a makeshift hood, and captured shot after shot of Luna's pale face, the damp strands of her hair plastered to her forehead, her fingers clawing at the sterile sheets as if emerging from a waking nightmare. With each click, Sheila felt the power shift in her favor. Evidence of Lee's coercion, proof of his dark orchestration, tangible leverage in the twisted game she intended to play. Sheila's message to Lee was delivered without mercy, a single photograph, sent by encrypted email at dawn, accompanied by 3 words typed in cold defiance: arrange custody, now. The image blazed across Lee's phone screen like a gauntlet thrown at his feet. Lee, already teetering on the brink of ruin after Luna's explosive courtroom confession, knew better than to underestimate his old adversary. Sheila had once been the public enemy, a siren whose seduction of chaos had nearly torn the Forrester-Finnegan dynasty apart. And yet here she was, exploiting the same vulnerabilities Lee had used to control Luna, wielding blackmail with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Behind closed doors, Lee's composure cracked. He paced the confines of his sprawling estate, the polished marble floors echoing with the hollow sound of his desperation. He recalled Luna's testimony, each word a hammer against the fragile construct of his reputation. I was his instrument. He taught me to pull the trigger. I refused to be his pawn any longer. Those voices, recorded and preserved, would condemn him to life behind bars unless he found a way to placate Sheila's demands. In an uncharacteristic move that sent ripples through Los Angeles society pages, Lee extended an olive branch to his most notorious foe. He arranged a clandestine meeting in a dimly lit warehouse far from prying eyes, the air thick with the scent of motor oil and old wood. Sheila arrived in a sleek black SUV, her trademark leather jacket reflecting the amber glow of the single overhead bulb. As she emerged from the vehicle, her eyes cold yet alight with predatory triumph, Lee rose to greet her with a forced courtesy. Words were unnecessary at first. The loaded look they exchanged spoke volumes. At her signal, he produced a sealed envelope containing the legal documents transferring partial custody of baby Hayes into Sheila's temporary guardianship, an offer she accepted with a flicker of amusement playing across her lips. The alliance was sealed not with a handshake but with a silent nod, 2 former enemies bound by mutual self-interest and the knowledge that together, their combined leverage could shatter the Forrester-Finnegan legacy. From that moment on, the future of Steffi's family teetered on a knife's edge. Sheila and Lee, like shadow operatives in a high-stakes war, coordinated their moves in whispers and coded messages. Sheila threatened to release Luna's treatment photos to tabloids, to parade Lee's manipulations before the world, unless he further dismantled the protective orders keeping her at bay. Lee, in turn, threatened to unleash the full force of his legal team, hinting at explosive details of Sheila's own past transgressions, unsolved arsons, vanished witnesses, and a trail of broken lives left in her wake. Both knew that if either betrayed the other, the fallout would be catastrophic. Under their dark pact, custody hearings loomed like storm clouds on the horizon, ready to drag Steffi and Finn into a courtroom battle that would expose every intimate detail of their family drama. As Forrester Finnegan allies rallied to defend baby Hayes, whispers of Sheila's resurgence spread through the corridors of Forrester Creations like wildfire. Ridge, torn between his duties as a patriarch and the painful memories of Sheila's past betrayals, convened emergency meetings with his siblings, grappling with the realization that the threat came not just from without, but from within their own fractured ranks. Shauna hovered on the sidelines, her loyalties torn between the mother she once loved and the daughter-in-law she trusted. Meanwhile, Luna's recovery continued in protective custody, her every breath a reminder of the stakes at play. She had traded her freedom for the chance to expose Lee's reign of psychological terror, but now, caught between Lee's desperation and Sheila's ruthless ambition, Luna faced a new nightmare. The possibility that the only way to free herself of Lee's shadow was to become collateral in Sheila's relentless pursuit of power. In the glittering towers of LA's legal elite, pretrial motions piled up like corpses in a battlefield trench. Attorneys for Steffi argued that granting Sheila custody would be tantamount to handing the fox the keys to the henhouse. Lee's counsel countered with accusations of Steffi's neglect amid her public crusade against him. Media vans lined the courthouse entrance, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like mechanical vultures circling fresh prey. Inside, Sheila and Lee sat side by side, a tableau of uneasy alliance. Eyes fixed on the judge's bench, each prepared to betray the other at the faintest flicker of opportunity. Outside the ornate glass doors, Finn paced, his surgeon's steadiness replaced by a raw, haunted uncertainty. He had once trusted his mother implicitly. Now he wrestled with the terrible notion that the woman who had given him life might be the architect of his family's downfall. And so, at the cusp of what promised to be the most explosive chapter in Forrester Finnegan history, the stage was set for a clash that would reverberate through every boardroom and boulevard in Los Angeles. Sheila, predator incarnate, prowled the legal shadows with evidence in hand. Lee, master manipulator, wielded blackmail like a scalpel, and caught between them, the fate of Luna, Steffi, Finn, and baby Hayes hung in a precarious balance. In a world where alliances shift like desert sands and trust is the rarest currency, one question remained: which would prove stronger, the desperate bonds forged in fear and convenience, or the enduring ties of family tested by betrayal and redemption? As the courtroom doors swung open for another day of hearings, the city held its collective breath, knowing that whatever verdict emerged would reshape the power dynamics of Beverly Hills for years to come. Bill Spencer stood in the fluorescent glare of the ICU corridor, his heart pounding in a rhythm that threatened to burst from his chest. He had been told, over and over, by the attending physician, that his son's condition was critical and that interference could kill him. Even Steffi had pleaded, tears glistening in her eyes, for him to stay back, to trust the experts. But Bill's world had narrowed to one singular truth: Liam wouldn't wake up without him. Nothing else mattered. Not the law, not the doctors, not the desperate protests of Brooke or Ridge hovering at the nurse's station. He swept aside the clipboard of a startled orderly, cradled Liam's fragile form in his arms, and, with a determined glare that brooked no argument, strode past the shocked security guard at the door. The guard reached for the panic button, but Bill was already out the swinging doors, through the echoing hospital lobby, past gurneys and white coats, and into the night air. The city's hum wrapped around him like a challenge as he hailed a cab, demanded the driver floor it, and disappeared into the maze of streets, his son pressed against his chest like a sacred burden. Behind him, alarms had been triggered, nurses and doctors spilled into the hallway in disbelief, and Steffi's anguished scream cut through the chaos as she realized Liam was gone. Brooke, her face pale with fear, lunged for Bill's coat sleeve only to grasp empty air. Ridge's voice rose above the din, acrid with betrayal and panic. "He can't do this," Brooke cried, but Ridge shook his head, already dialing 911, shouting the cab's license number even as sirens wailed in the distance. Within minutes, patrol cars flooded the hospital driveway, lights blaring like a warning beacon across the night sky. Meanwhile, Bill felt the edges of panic gnawing at him with every pounding tire that echoed beneath his cab window, but he forced himself to focus on his son's still form. Memories of Liam's births and first words, his laughter bouncing down Spencer Publications' hallways, flooded Bill's mind and steeled his resolve. He told the cabbie to head west, off the main arteries, weaving through back roads and industrial zones where the chase would be harder to follow. But even as he plotted each turn, Brooke's image haunted him, her tear-streaked face, her hands trembling as they hovered by the unlocked ICU door, fuel for his guilt and his oath that Liam would answer to him alone. Brooke and Ridge, riding in separate police cruisers, received updates from the dispatcher with mounting dread. The suspect vehicle had juked northbound on Sunset, then vanished near the old train yards. Ridge barked orders to the rookie behind the wheel. "Split up, set up roadblocks at Mulholland and Santa Monica, corner him before he reached the coast." Brooke sat rigidly in the passenger seat, her knuckles white against the door handle, as she recounted Bill's fragile history, his whispered threats when he felt powerless, the feral devotion that had once driven him to darker acts. Every woman who knew Bill understood the raw heat of his love, sometimes suffocating, often reckless, and now it was suffocating his own son. "He'll do anything," Ridge warned over the radio. "Anything to get that boy to respond." Cameras from traffic helicopters spun above, their searchlights carving crisscross patterns on the pavement as the chase stretched into the late hours, a ballet of headlights and sirens chasing one man's paternal desperation. In a small ICU room far from the hospital flap, Steffi Forrester Finnegan hovered beside an unconscious Liam, her own tears an unrelenting witness to the nightmare unfolding beyond the walls. She counted his breaths, monitored the pump feeding his 4 lines, her slender fingers brushing the back of his hand as if to coax life back into him with her touch alone. Every alert tone of the machines seemed to chastise her for his absence, every beep a reminder of the catastrophe Bill had unleashed. She replayed his final moments in her mind, the determined set of his jaw when he refused to let doctors near Liam's bedside without his consent, his voice taut with conviction as he promised their son that no one but he would bring him back. Steffi's own love for Liam was fierce, but she knew Bill's devotion was a different beast, untamed, primal, a force that valued results over rules. Now she found herself praying for the police to catch him before he reached some remote hideaway, praying for Liam to stay alive long enough for medical care, praying that the father and son both would come through the night. Bill's cab finally screeched to a halt behind an abandoned warehouse near the Malibu cliffs, where the ocean's dark silhouette cracked with moon-streaked waves. He carried Liam inside, his breath ragged as he laid the boy gently on a dusty pallet, pushing aside crates and pallets until he fashioned a makeshift station. He ripped off strips of cloth from his own shirt to secure the 4-line, applied pressure where bruises on Liam's arms glowed with inflammation, and pressed his ear to the boy's chest, willing his heartbeat to thunder beneath his palm. The distant wail of police sirens dissolved under the roar of the surf, and for a moment, Bill allowed himself to believe they had lost his trail. He leaned closer, his voice a low murmur. "Come on, kiddo. Wake up. Daddy's here." He fished a small oxygen mask from his satchel, slipped it over Liam's mouth and nose, and squeezed the bag, watching the rise and fall of a chest that stubbornly refused to rise. Memories of Liam's bright smile at Christmas, the way he called him Big Daddy at bedtime, flashed through Bill's mind, each a dagger of love and fear. He tapped Liam's cheek, harder this time, and hissed, "Wake up, Liam. I need you." Back at the hospital, Brooke and Ridge coordinated with Highway Patrol as the chase stretched along the Pacific Coast Highway. The moonlight glinted off Ridge's polished badge as he studied satellite images displayed on a tablet, tracing the path of the cab's GPS ping. "He's heading south," the dispatcher confirmed. "Last ping near Zuma Beach." Ridge's lips tightened. "We'll meet him there," he said, glancing at Brooke, whose eyes had hardened into resolve. They piled into an unmarked cruiser, sirens off, but lights low, determined to intercept Bill before he reached any sort of sanctuary. The roar of engines and the whoosh of tires accompanied their flight along the winding coastal road, where the only light came from the stars overhead and the intermittent glow of distant homes perched on the bluffs. Each bend in the road held the promise of a confrontation. Each stretch of asphalt echoed with familial betrayal and the risk of irrevocable tragedy. Inside the warehouse, Bill's hand trembled as he sensed the shifting balance between hope and horror. He knew the sirens would soon drown out even the ocean's roar, but he refused to yield. He tapped Liam's side with a clinician's precision, recalling the CPR training he had received for his corporate wellness program. He pressed down on the chest, counted the rhythm, blew into the mask, and repeated. Minutes passed with an eternity's wait until, at last, the monitors, silent relics he had stolen from the hospital, registered a faint flicker. A pulse. It was weak, erratic, but there. The stubborn ember of a life refusing to die. Bill's chest heaved with a laugh born of pure, desperate relief. "There you are," he whispered, voice thick. "You little warrior." His eyes filled with tears as he embraced Liam's still form, cradling him like the most precious thing in the world. At Zuma Beach Observation Point, Brooke and Ridge emerged from the cruiser, weapons drawn but hearts heavier than the steel in their hands. Through the doorway of the warehouse, they spotted Bill bending over Liam's stretcher, the moonlight catching the glint of the oxygen mask and Bill's anguished face. Brooke's breath caught. Ridge placed a steady hand on her shoulder. They stepped forward together, voices commanding. "Bill, let him go," Ridge called, his tone etched with paternal authority. Bill froze, Liam's clammy forehead pressed to his chest. "Don't come any closer," he warned, his voice a growl of protection. Brooke advanced, tears shining on her cheeks. "Bill, this isn't you. We can help him." Ridge barked his name, his badge gleaming. "Now, Spencer." For a heartbeat, the world held its breath between the roar of the ocean and the wail of distant sirens. Then Bill stood upright, cradling Liam as he backed toward the shadows at the warehouse's far end, every muscle coiled for flight if necessary. Ridge shifted his stance, Brooke's hand trembled on her gun, and the night turned electric with the potential for violence or salvation. Inside the warehouse's gloom, Bill made one final plea, not to Ridge or Brooke, but to fate itself. "He's my son," Bill rasped, pressing his cheek to Liam's mask. "I did what had to be done." Ridge's voice softened. "We know you love him, Bill, but this isn't the way." The words seemed to hang in the air, and for a moment, Bill's resolve wavered. He glanced at Liam's small chest rising slowly under the influence of his makeshift CPR, then back at Ridge and Brooke, whose faces reflected equal parts fear and compassion. Distantly, he heard the police cruiser pull up, lights flashing in the warehouse's open entrance. With a deep breath, Bill lowered his arms, the weight of Liam in his hold heavier now with the realization of what he'd done. Brooke hurried forward and gently slid an arm around Bill's shoulder, guiding him. And their sleeping son, toward the waiting paramedics who had rushed in behind her. Ridge followed, his gaze locked on Liam, relief flooding through him as the paramedics took over, ushering Bill aside to face the consequences he had long evaded. In the aftermath, the night air settled into a fragile calm as paramedics loaded Liam into an ambulance, headed back to the ICU with Ridge and Steffi trailing in another cruiser. Brooke climbed into the ambulance's front seat, her eyes wet but triumphant. Bill sat beside her, silent tears marking his features as he watched paramedics hook Liam back up to the life-sustaining machines he'd fled. Ridge took the wheel, Steffi's hand gripping his arm as she climbed in behind him, her eyes fixed on the figure of the father who had risked everything for his son. The sirens wailed anew, carrying them through the night toward the hospital's welcoming doors. Bill's reckless gamble had ignited a portrait of devotion and desperation that would stain every headline in Los Angeles, but in the dim glow of the stretcher's monitor, as Liam's pulse steadied under the watch of skilled hands, one truth remained unshaken. Love had driven Bill to the edge of the law, but it had also saved their son from the brink.
Oh.